we're in this era now where everyone's just bogged down with music, whatever the case would be, constant music artists, but you're not getting the narrative. That's what made you care about them, and 20, 30 years ago was the story behind them.
Yeah. One of the things that you said earlier that really struck a chord with me is that artists will come to you that want to work with you, and they said they just like, I'm dropping music and like just do your job, right? And you're like, it don't really work that way.
Yeah.
So what do artists and managers get wrong in this day and age of working with a publicist?
I think sometimes that, I think some managers and just some artists in general as a whole, as we are all tasked with evolving as the industry evolves, some people take longer to evolve than others and say like, hey, but this worked. This has been the traditional way of doing press and PR. And it's like, it was, but now things have changed, right?
And they changed.
And being understanding and receptive to the fact.
Yeah.
And not everyone's going to get that sometimes. Sometimes people are like, no, but this is how it's supposed to be. And I'm like, it was like this at a certain point. But we have to be mindful of it now, where it's like the narrative, there has to be a narrative. If there's no narrative, if there's no story to tell, what's going to separate artist A from artist B?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's going to make this artist stand out from the marketplace? So anytime I'm taking on any new prospective clients, one of the first questions I ask is like, what are some of the stories about you that you feel like have not been shared with the world? What are those things like, and why do you feel like it hasn't, right?
Interesting.
And I try to kind of like push them, or like, okay, hey, outside of music, what else do you like, right? Do you like anime? Do you like real estate? Do you invest, right? Like, do you like sports? Whatever the case may be, because again, that helps with putting together a strategy of like, what else can we do to share your narrative? Someone's, oh yeah, I was a former college football player. Okay, cool. That's a start. Maybe we can lean into that, because that can allow you to, be able to think through different ideas. Like, for example, we work with Guyton, obviously, phenomenal country artist, trailblazer in that space. And it was really one time, it was just some casual, I think we had booked her to do the national anthem at the NBA Cup last year. And now it'll be in NBA Cup in 2024. So we're there, and she mentioned to me like, oh yeah, when I was in high school, I used to play AAU ball. And I'm like, really? I didn't know you were a hooper. So then I went back to the NBA, and I'm like, hey, could we have her play in the NBA celebrity game?
Smart.
And because I didn't know, and I'm taking this new piece of information you gave me. I'm like, oh, you hoop, like for real. She's like, I was good. She's like, I just tore my ACL. And then, the NBA was like, oh, let's do it. And they had her play in the NBA celebrity game. So that's what I mean by also knowing your clients beyond just the surface level. Exactly. Not enough people. A lot of people just listen to talk and say the next thing. Not enough people really listen and process the information and take every piece of information you're receiving from a client, from a manager, and figuring out, how does this new piece of information help me propel you and your client to the next step, into further goals.
Yeah.
So I took that piece of information. I'm like, oh, boom, we have to do this. And it turned out phenomenally. And even to, her team had told me that was one of the highest streaming days she had this year, just because it put her in a new audience, in front of a whole big sports audience.
Oh, shit.
And it came from just active listening, making that comment. I'm like, oh, huh.
From her playing in the NBA Celebrity All-Star Game, that became her highest streaming day on music?
It was a high streaming day of the year for her, from what her team had told me. It was just because there was a lot of people. Huh?
In music.
Oh, and yeah, and her music for this year, for it was just, I wouldn't say it was the highest, but it was just like, it was definitely one of the peak days that they identified in their data, because a lot of people, when she's being put in front of this new platform playing in the NBA celeb game, a lot of people have been like, yo, let me check this out. Who is she? And then checking out her music, right?
You're right.
So that was one of those times where you actually see kind of quantifiable, like, data from something that you had actually executed. But it stemmed from when we had her doing the national anthem, and we're just bullshitting and talking, and you take, she lets that information of how she used to hoop. And not only did we have her in the celeb game, but then we had her do a couple sports interviews, as well, where to amplify her participation in the game, then talking about how she played AAU, and then talking about some of her favorite NBA players. Like, we had like Lou Williams and Michelle Beadle interview her, and like Lou Williams didn't know like how much of a fan she was, and she's like, no, Lou, like, I was devastated when you left the Clippers. And he was like stunned, like, wait, you for real? Like, you really know? So it's just one of those things where it's just like where you can be an active listener, and you try to push your clients and learn as much about them as possible to figure out and brainstorm new forms of storytelling, new ideas.
Yeah.
Because you're always trying to just reinvent yourself and and just bring new thoughts, to the table. But that can't happen without you getting kind of that information from artists. So that's why, I try to push that all the time. It's like, know the people you're representing, push for more information, learn about them outside of the music. What's their true narrative? What are their true interests? Because if they're really interested in something, they're going to be more inclined to want to do it and speak about it from a press perspective.
Yeah, real talk. All right, everybody, we're going to take a little break. Because if you're listening and thinking, fuck, I could really use some guidance right now, and you're serious about building your career in the music industry, I'm now offering private strategy sessions. These are fully personalized, just you and me tackling whatever you need in your career. With over 16 years of experience working with artists, managers, and brands, I can help you map out your next moves. Now, whether that's structuring your team, scaling your brand, navigating the industry, even figuring out what steps to take, whether to go to a distributor or to a record label and figuring out what are the best deal points, I can help you with your career with where you're at. You can now book a one-on-one with me through my Calendly, and you can find the link in the description. Now let's get back to the pod. When is it that you know that an artist is ready to have proper PR versus not?
Great question. I think it's where the storytelling is, in my opinion. Even artists from I think, let me rephrase that. From when I decide I want to take them on from ourselves, right? I think any artist, you're going to need any form of storytelling to be able to get yourself to the next level. You're starting out, but you always have to identify what is it about you that separates you from everybody else. Mm-hmm. And if there's not a good enough reason, then that's where you as an artist have to work through that reason. Sometimes it's just letting the music speak for itself. Mm-hmm. But that's why it's, again, what are those other intangibles? What are these other things about your narrative that is going to make it easier for me to share your narrative with the world, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. It's like, because otherwise it's like, we're in this era now where everyone's just bogged down with music, whatever the case would be, constant music artists, but you're not getting the narrative. That's what made you care about them. And, 20, 30 years ago was the story behind them. Yeah. So it's like, hey, how do we make that story behind them for you to care, for you to have an emotional connection with them outside of just the music?
Right. It's one of those things that's also really hard to tell a story, because you said there's a lot of noise out there. And one thing that a lot of artists need to consider is that, artists in the music business, or artists in general now, when it comes to music, they don't have a dedicated place that they can go to and like really just specifically talk about music when it comes to these social media platforms. There's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's YouTube, but these aren't music platforms. They're entertainment platforms, which means you're competing with the Drewskis of the world. You're competing with politics. You're competing with sports. You're competing with streamers. So how do you really definitively tell your story with all of these different platforms that aren't specific to music?
Man, I think I see opportunity with that. That's why, there's opportunity with that, right? So it's like every interview you do, every platform is an opportunity to introduce yourself to a new audience.
Yeah.
And maybe you may get a different story out of it in one platform that, you may get in from a different platform. You know what I mean? Like Neo, you may get a different story out of him when he's on, CBS Mornings, right? Compared to when he's going to be on Bloomberg, or when he's going to be on a creator
or Joe and Jada.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Joe and Jada, right? So it's just like
That's my first time hearing that he's going into the country world.
space, yeah. And that even for me, that's really exciting from a storytelling perspective, because even with someone like him who's been in the game for 20 years, there's a whole new opportunity for a new level of storytelling, which I think is phenomenal. It's one of my favorite things to do. Like, we had him present at the CMA Awards, which was phenomenal. We were able to get him to perform at the Grand Ole Opry, which is like a rite of passage in the country space, right?
Okay.
So just even being able to, when we, all agreed, with his management, like, hey, why don't we preview a song, for Joe and Jada, and like do that. Like, that was part of a collective strategy where we all were like, hey, like, let's give them a little taste just so that they can, and that clip blew up. They blew up because that honestly prompted us to change the strategy. They were looking at a different single, but they just decided, let's give the world a taste of this one on Joe and Jada. And because it blew up so much, ended up pivoting and like, I
want to touch on that.
Yeah.
So in real time, things got to change on the fly, especially in this day and age. How important is it that you can be able to pivot?
Oh, all the time.
And not fight it.
All the time. And you have to, especially, we work in such a high pressure environment where, artist teams change their mind, management teams change their mind, things that are out of your control happen so frequently. Like, one of the things I take a lot of pride in as a professional is I learned a long time ago when I was younger, like, Focus on the things you can control, and that's it. Don't stress yourself out about the things you can't control. And there's a lot of times where, because things change so frequently, a lot of people get really bogged down and get so pissed about things changing, where my approach is just take it as a matter of fact. This happened. Okay, let's adjust to it. As opposed to like, but why did this change? Why did this happen? A lot of people try to fight that. And it's like, you don't have to just keep fighting it, right? It's just like, okay, it happened. Like, if there's room for it, sometimes you push back, sure. But it's like, sometimes you just got to accept that it happened. You may be on a tight time crunch. So it's like, yo, at this point, I got to figure it out. I don't have a lot of time. And I think one of the funniest, craziest experiences I had that, goes to your point about just kind of adaptability and like in real time was, it's probably about like 2019. This is when I was working with Meek Mill. I was also working with Michael Rubin. We handled Meek's publicity, also working with Michael and handling his PR, and obviously the Reform Alliance, the criminal justice reform organization. And we had went to Pennsylvania. This is like middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, where they went to go visit a gentleman that had been incarcerated simply because he just he couldn't, like, it was a nonviolent thing. He didn't have enough money to be able to get himself out of there and pay, and because he was on the probation and parole system, he was incarcerated just because he didn't have the funds to pay like a ticket. So long story short, they're visiting him. We're gonna do this press conference outside of the prison for them to talk and advocate for the story. While they're visiting, like once they set foot in there, we find out the prison's like, nah, you can't do any interviews here. Now, mind you, you're in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. So I'm like, shit, I had all these media outlets coming here. Like, I had a bunch of media outlets coming. We can't do it here anymore. They're meeting with this guy. They're going to be out in 30 minutes. Where the hell am I putting this press conference at? So I'm just going through my phone, and I see like there's a Wawa, maybe like 5-7 minutes out, and I'm like, oh shit, they got a parking lot there. So we go to the Wawa. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Let's just do it at the Wawa, but like in the parking lot. But the parking lot has a picturesque background, so you don't actually know you're doing it in a Wawa parking lot.
But
exactly. So we set it up. I told everybody change the ID. I was like, yo, the address now is this area. Sent everybody to the Wawa. Once Meek and Michael came out, I was like, just come to this location. We did the whole press conference at a Wawa, but again, you wouldn't have been able to tell because where the parking lot was facing, it was just such a nice picturesque background.
That's what's up.
But
we'll pull it up.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where you had to be adaptable on the fly, and rather than try to continue to push back on like why the prison wasn't going to let you do interviews, is accepting the circumstances as they are, realizing, okay, I'm on a tight crunch. How do I make this work on this tight of a turnaround and be able to execute the job?